Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Great. So thank you so much, CSR Box, for organizing this panel, which is not a manel. So in the spirit of inclusivity, we have a good set of experts here representing all sectors, from the government to private sector, CSRs, and non-profits. So how we would like to engage with each other and all of you is that we will ask each other a few questions and then we'll open it up for discussions. And so the first question I like to ask my panelists really is that the new education policy is a very ambitious document that we've released for ourselves, which talks about an education system that contributes for an equitable and vibrant knowledge economy. Keeping this in mind, and with this vision, what in your view are the top 3 priorities that need attention through these CSR engagements to specifically address learning loss, especially in the context of COVID-19 school closures and the lack of access that children have had over the last 2 years? So we'd love to hear. And Dhanashri, we'd start with you.
So thank you, Kanupriya, and good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So Kanupriya talked about top 3 priorities in the NEP and what is it that the CSR funds can really, or companies can really leverage. My sense is that the NEP sets for us not just an ambitious target, but it also sort of opens up a pathway for doing those things that were not emphasized inside of education. So there's the emphasis on full human potential, multidisciplinary learning. And therefore, from that perspective, if one looks at the document, I feel that it's path-breaking, that it actually talks about foundational numeracy and literacy much more than just education. It talks about higher order thinking skills, for the first time talking about thinking skills, problem solving, critical analysis, and it talks about socio-emotional skills and abilities. I think these 3 things are not only important but very critical for any policy on education to have, to ensure that we are actually talking about children, young people ready for the 21st century. So therefore, if you ask for my priorities, at number 1 would be foundational numeracy and literacy along with socio-emotional skills and abilities. Followed by that, I would really applaud the fact that it talks about inclusion. It talks about reaching out to not only girls, but children of all genders and socio-economically disadvantaged groups, and the setting up of an inclusion fund. So I think we have to go out and address the last remaining disadvantages that children face in accessing education. So access barriers. And the third most important thing is teacher capacities. They are the bedrock of the work that we do in schools and the work we do with children. So some of those things that have been written up about teacher capacities and investing in them, in pre-service, in-service training, in strengthening institutions that train teachers, I think unless that happens, the school does not function without its foundation, which is the teachers. So those are the priorities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for highlighting the 3 priorities. It's very interesting that a document that's that big, we are able to identify just 3 things. I'll move on to Monika to share some thoughts on this as well.
A very good evening to everyone, and congratulations to CSR Box for organizing such a huge platform for collaboration and conversations over here. I think very rightly Dhanashri and Kanupriya did set the context of how NEP looks into things. For me, if I personally talk about, I think relating it to COVID times, there are several studies which said that the students who are good learners still had lesser learning gaps compared to the ones who would maybe continue rote learning. So for me, I think the first takeaway is to develop CSR as a function or as a larger support system for the nation. Maybe needs to focus on students who learn and become great learners rather than taking up a rote system of learning. So that to me is really, really important, and I think COVID just reiterated that whole importance of being a good learner and not just scoring marks and just reading something and giving exams. I think that is something that is very clearly coming up through the policy, and thanks to COVID has taught us few things in that way. So I think that is my first thing that I would want to talk about here. Secondly, I think again, it's a very a future-looking document, forward-looking kind of a document, and it really emphasizes on the 21st century skills and holistic development for the children. I think which is again really, really key, because the kind of challenges that we see in this times, and it's only going to grow in the coming times. So for me, I think again, the whole area of holistic development, capturing everything and developing student as a great learner is, are two components which really support each other. And last but not the least, there's so many things that are there in NEP as a policy, but for me, if I have to pick up three, last would be, really using technology for enabling, not just students, but even teachers to be better educators or students to be good learners. And more important again, going back to the COVID times, we knew and we know that there is a great divide in terms of, if you talk about the tech or digital accessibility. So CSR has also a lot of space or can really work upon that area and build that divide as well.
Thank you so much. I mean, really, the last 2 years have shown us how technology is important, how quickly we move from a physical existence to one online. So thank you so much for bringing that out. Satyajit, would you like to share some thoughts, please?
So first of all, thanks, I think, to CSR Box for, organizing a fantastic platform and for inviting me. I actually, I think from more or less from my experience, I think the entire focus on making digital tools available and using digital means to address the learning loss has been something which has been a big takeaway for me. I unfortunately don't think I would have many more, and also the second one for me would probably be sort of looking at supporting mental health. I think that's looking at the socio-emotional learning mechanisms, I think, is an important one, which I think and I think I like Monika's point of how the NEP is brought out. I think and I think it's a testament that this brings sort of focus on the 21st century skills, but it's interesting that we took 21 years into the 21st century to bring it, right? So, but better late than never, and I think this is something which, in spite of COVID having largely gone now, some of these tools we started using during COVID, and I think it will help, hopefully, in delivering CSR initiatives and making an impact in the education space. Thank you. Back to you, Kanupriya.
Thank you so much, and thank you for making that plug for mental health. I think it's really important, and it's critical that all of us address it, especially for young children who've been away from their classmates for so long. So, Abhishek, now you have the difficult task of going last in this round, so we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much, CSR Box, for inviting me and always organizing very thought-provoking, very insightful annual event. In fact, we had missed it during COVID time. So thank you so much, Kanupriya ji, for this question. मुझे तीन बातें लगती है कि जिस पे बहुत सोचने की ज़रूरत है. The first thing is NEP is focusing on language. पूरी दुनिया में डिबेट चल रहा है कौन से लैंग्वेज में बच्चों को पढ़ाना चाहिए. सब कहते हैं, कोई डाउट ही नहीं है कि नेटिव लैंग्वेज होना चाहिए, मदर टंग होना चाहिए. But we all know the perception and everything. I'm not going to, invoke debate on language related issues, क्योंकि हर बार जब भी NEP आती है तो सबसे ज़्यादा इश्यूज होते हैं कि हाँ ये इस लैंग्वेज को थोपने की कोशिश हो रही है या इस लैंग्वेज को प्रमोट करने की कोशिश हो रही है. आई थिंक फर्स्ट टाइम वी आर हैविंग एनी पॉलिसी जो लैंग्वेज को एक डिवीज़न का बेसिस नहीं मानती. इनफैक्ट वो बोलती है कि पहले हम ट्रिपल लैंग्वेज फार्मूले की बातें कर रहे थे, अभी कह रही है कि नेटिव लैंग्वेज को प्रमोट करना है. यू विल बी हैप्पी टू नो दैट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ institutions who are responsible for example, AICTE, for example, other institutions, जो regulatory authorities हैं, they are trying to provide textbook in local languages. Local language केवल हिंदी नहीं, तमिल में, ओडिया में, हर लैंग्वेज में. बट ये काम आई थिंक गवर्नमेंट नहीं कर पाएगी, बिल्कुल नहीं कर पाएगी अकेले. यहाँ पे सोशल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को, CSR को बहुत, क्योंकि दूसरे लैंग्वेज में, स्पेशली इन नेटिव लैंग्वेज, वी ऑलवेज यूज्ड टू सी कि ट्रांसलेटेड वर्क मिल जाते हैं, बट ओरिजिनल वर्क कैसे होगा, स्केल पे कैसे होगा. एंड यू ऑल नो दैट मेजॉरिटी ऑफ स्कूल्स स्पेशली आर अंडर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट. एंड आपको पता है कि फंडिंग की क्या स्टेटस है, कितने बजट खर्च हो रहे हैं. सो आई थिंक पहला जो चीज़ है जो NEP और वहाँ पे काफ़ी रोल होगा वो लैंग्वेज का है. दूसरा है जिसके बारे में बहुत सारे लोगों ने बातें करी, बट आई थिंक सब जानते हैं, स्पेशली दोज हु आर फ्रॉम रूरल एरिया, दोज हु आर फ्रॉम ट्राइबल एरिया, दोज हु आर फ्रॉम अंडर प्रिविलेज सेक्शंस, their first priority is to somehow survive, right? Education में उनको स्किलिंग, रीस्किलिंग, वोकेशनल ट्रेनिंग, एजुकेशन, इसकी इम्पोर्टेंस को कितना पता है. आई थिंक हम सबको गांधी का चंपारण मॉडल पढ़ना चाहिए. अब हमने पढ़ा हो, देखा हो तो बहुत अच्छी बात, नहीं तो जानना चाहिए कि दैट टाइम गांधी बिलीव कि हम एजुकेशनली एम्पावर्ड तब कर पाएंगे जब कोई वोकेशनली एम्पावर्ड रहेगा, जब उसको हम उसके घर से दूर नहीं करेंगे. ऐसे बुनियादी स्कूल खोले गए जहाँ पे बच्चे लाइफ स्किल्स भी सीखेंगे और जीने का जरिया भी सीखेंगे और साथ ही साथ में एजुकेशन भी कंप्लीट करेंगे. आई थिंक फर्स्ट टाइम वी आर हैविंग एजुकेशन पॉलिसी जो वोकेशनल एजुकेशन को इम्पोर्टेंस दे रही है. ये नहीं कि 12th करने के बाद तुम ITI में एडमिशन ले लो या 10th करने के बाद, शुरुआत से ही कोशिश कर रही है. बट ये बहुत बड़ा काम है, बहुत बड़ा काम है. एंड फॉर दैट वी नीड एक्टिव एंड पार्टिसिपेटरी इंगेजमेंट ऑफ CSR, गवर्नमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, सिविल सोसाइटीज़, क्योंकि वो एक्सेप्टेबिलिटी भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है. जो तीसरा है कि फर्स्ट टाइम वी आर हैविंग एजुकेशन पॉलिसी जो जेंडर के बारे में बात करती है, इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन के बारे में. पहले भी बातें हो रही थी, ऐसा नहीं कि नहीं हो रही थी. कई सारे ऐसे जो डिसरप्टिव बातें हैं, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल छोटे बच्चों को भी पढ़ाने की बातें कर रही है ICDS. कनुप्रिया जी लंबे टाइम से इस कॉज को लेकर काम करें. इंडिया में अभी भी छोटा तो है, अभी क्या पढ़ाने की, इसकी उम्र ही नहीं हुई है. वो एक्सेप्टेंस कहाँ से आएगा. दूसरा है कि जेंडर की चीज़ों को कैसे स्कूलों तक ले जाएंगे. बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं. ऑन द सेम टाइम एजुकेशन पॉलिसी पहली बार खुल के बोल रही है कि देखो ये काम केवल टीचर्स, गवर्नमेंट या जो रेलेवेंट स्टेक होल्डर्स उसका नहीं है. वी हैव टू इंगेज विद द सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, वी हैव टू इंगेज विद देम. ये बड़ा काम है. गवर्नमेंट की अपनी पॉलिसी है, गवर्नमेंट का अपना तरीका है लोगों के साथ इंगेज होने का. बट हाउ वी कैन सिस्टमेटिकली इंगेज विद डिफरेंट स्टेक होल्डर्स सो दैट इन सारे टॉपिक्स पे भी छोटे बच्चों को पढ़ाना ज़रूरी है. ये बातें कन्विंस करने में वी विल टेक आई थिंक फ्यू मोर ईयर्स. सो आई थिंक वी कैन गो ऑन, बट आई थिंक ये 3 चीज़ें जो मुझे लगती हैं कि जो चेंजेस आए हैं उसको एक्सेप्ट कराना सोसाइटी में, उसको लेकर हम कैसे पुश करेंगे, कैसे ऑर्गेनाइज्ड वे में काम करेंगे. आई थिंक दैट शुड बी द प्रायोरिटी.
थैंक यू अभिषेक. आई थिंक आपने बहुत महत्वपूर्ण चीज़ कही है कि मदर टंग इंस्ट्रक्शन इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. एंड मैं खुद हिंदी मीडियम की पढ़ी हूँ, सो आई अंडरस्टैंड द बेनिफिट्स दैट हैज़ गिवन मी इन लाइफ. आई सीम टू हैव डन ऑल राइट बिकॉज माई फाउंडेशन वॉज स्ट्रॉन्ग इन माई मदर टंग. जो स्कूल में हो रहा था वही घर में हो रहा था. इट वॉज एन इंडियन लैंग्वेज दैट आई वॉज लर्निंग इन. सो आई थिंक दैट्स अ वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट. एंड आई थिंक द होल पैनल हैज़ रेज्ड वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पॉइंट्स बिकॉज द डॉक्यूमेंट that we've got for ourselves is very ambitious. So I'll take a cue from your last point of partnerships, and I think I'll ask my panel a little bit more on, we have this very interesting mix of people where we have the non-profit sector, we have private sector, we have CSR, and we have the government. And the point is repeatedly being made that, the enormity of the document or the enormity of the task or the vision that the national education policy is presenting for us cannot be achieved by one player alone. So in that context, I'd love to hear thoughts from the panelists in terms of what are some of the successful models of partnership and collaboration between the various stakeholders that can help us achieve this vision that we have. And what do you think are some of the strengths of these models? And I'll switch this up a little bit and I'll ask Monica to go first this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanupriya. I think it's a beautiful thread of conversations that's going on, and I think I'll start with where Abhishek also left, where in talking about context. So when we talk about models, to my perspective, it's very important to see what is the context that we're talking about in when we talk about a specific model. So when we're talking about, for example, we know that for girls, the maximum dropout happens after fifth, right? So the model has to be centric towards ensuring that we, work with them and pick up at the right time, and also communicate with the communities, the parents, and all the stakeholders who play a very, very vital role in ensuring that they get their education going forward. And so I think it's a very important to have context-specific model. When we talk about other disadvantaged communities, or if we talk about rural, urban, we cannot have a one model perspective for all the programs for sure. And I think we have really, great. This platform in itself is a great space for looking into how beautiful collaboration opportunities we have with different partners who are doing work maybe in the space of gender, or in the space of working with the differently abled, etc. So I think we really need to collaborate and build up our models specific to the interventions that we need to do, whether we're doing as a CSR. What we can do is maybe, I think whatever we plan to do, whether big or small, that doesn't really matter. What we can do, we must do. And, pick up models. For example, if I talk about ourselves, so, gender is one of these focus areas. And we are working on an adolescent program wherein specifically the work is starting after fifth standard, and the whole model looks into walking through them in entire journey, right from schooling till they actually take up the higher education and maybe skilling going forward. So again, this is a beginning for us too. We are also learning, and we're hoping that this becomes a model where we can share more about with everyone going forward. So yeah, I think I'll stop there.
No, thank you so much. We at the World Bank are always talking about the fact that, we cannot do one project for India, because India is a collection of countries, of small little countries, each state. We cannot have something that's working for Uttar Pradesh and make it work in Kerala. So it has to be very, very context specific. Thank you for sharing that. So from non-profits, I'll move a little to the private sector, and Satyajit, we'd love to hear your views.
Thanks, Kanupriya. So I think, just as an example, or rather before I give the example, we have different projects in different parts of the country, and like you said, absolutely, while we may have started at some stage with some sort of a template, but it never works out that way. Every particular institution, organization, or area has its own needs. So as an example, something which has worked out for us with one particular project is where we've worked with an implementing agency which has collaborated with the government. The government provides, local government, municipal body provides infrastructure, the school building. The implementing agency comes with its skills in terms of designing the curriculum, the pedagogy of teaching, and of course funding the, looking at the teachers and skilling the teachers. And we, in a sense, bring in funding to, sort of support it. And even there, we've seen with time what has happened is that when the school has done well, then the government has come back, or the local body has come back and said, look, let us also participate. We will fund some part of the teacher's cost, or we will bring in a, let's say, local language teacher or something like that. So I think, like you, I think, identified, may not be one size fits all, but I think whatever works and whatever you can, and I take Monika's point very well, that look, whatever you can do, even if it's small, large, medium ticket, you should do, because I think it's not only the CSR obligation under law, but I think overall it's a corporate, as a corporate citizen, that's a responsibility you have. One interesting point may not be connected is that we tend to see a lot of focus on areas which, from the private sector side, areas where largely the private sector is. So let's say a Bangalore, let's say a Pune, let's say a Delhi NCR will get much more funding perhaps, and rather than the Northeast, Bihar, sort of certain parts where maybe industry is not there. There is a preference under law for local area development, etc. So, which again is a preference. So there's no obligation, but that tends to see more funding, I guess, going into these areas, which I think is probably not that great in the long term. But back to you, Kanupriya.
No, thank you so much for raising that point. Funding is always an issue because it's so disparate and it's so uneven across the country, which goes back to your point that, it can't be one size fits all. It has to be very, very context specific. Thank you for sharing that. And Abhishek, we'll come back to you to hear from you as well, your thoughts on this.
So, again, my observation will be the generalized because from government perspective, there are so many things where corporate, where social organizations can engage with, but I'm just sharing few personal observations. I think what should be a kind of practical approach. So I'm just sharing one example. I know one person who is running one organization called Sajha in Delhi and some other locations. So what they have observed, स्कूलों में बच्चे पढ़ने जाते हैं, but उनके पेरेंट्स को पता नहीं होता कि वो क्या पढ़ते हैं. So they thought to engage with the parents. और हम सब लोग, especially during COVID time, we all have realized, especially those who are having kids, हम पहले टीचर्स क्या करते थे क्लासरूम में हमें पता ही नहीं होता था. पढ़े लिखे लोगों की बात कर रहा हूँ. But those who are not having such practical, क्या चल रहा है स्कूल में, so उन्होंने पेरेंट्स के साथ इंगेज करना शुरू किया, स्ट्रेंथन करना शुरू किया स्कूल मैनेजमेंट सोसाइटीज़ को, एंड वहाँ से कुछ इम्पैक्ट आने शुरू हुए. So what I'm saying, again, I'm citing one more example. I know one very young person, Abhishek, who is working with Muskan Dreams, actually started. So what he observed, जो मुझे लगा कि especially जो rural areas, especially the government school, those who are having lack of digital facilities, although through Operation Digital Board, government is having ambitious project where, by 2025, earlier it was a target to achieve it by 2023, but due to COVID. So Operation Digital Board में सारे स्कूलों में डिजिटल बोर्ड लगने हैं, स्पेशली मिडिल स्कूल में, हायर एजुकेशंस में, जितने भी हायर सेकेंडरी स्कूल्स हैं, सब में डिजिटल बोर्ड होने वाले हैं. मतलब ब्लैक बोर्ड हटा के डिजिटल बोर्ड लगाना है. एंड यू ऑल कैन रीड अबाउट इट. गवर्नमेंट ने बहुत बड़ा पैसा उसमें इन्वेस्ट भी किया है. कोविड की वजह से काफ़ी प्रॉब्लम भी हुई. बट मुस्कान ड्रीम्स की हो या फिर आई एम जस्ट फॉरगेटिंग वन नेम फ्रॉम बिहार, he is passed out from IIT Delhi. So he started providing digital infrastructures to government school with the help of the CSR, with the help of the companies, with the help of the social organizations. So I think यहाँ पे अप्रोच जो है बहुत ही प्रैक्टिकल अप्रोच होने की ज़रूरत है कि आइडेंटिफाई दोज स्मॉल थिंग्स. आई नो वन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जिनके साथ मैंने भी काम, he is my friend and he used to share all these things. वो क्या करता है कि वो उन बच्चों को स्कॉलरशिप प्रोवाइड करने में हेल्प कर रहा है. आई एम रियली थैंकफुल टू ऑल दोज ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हु यूज्ड टू प्रोवाइड सम स्कॉलरशिप टू द नीडी स्टूडेंट्स. और उसकी वजह से thousands of children are getting higher educations. So we have to identify those core areas where you can not only leverage the government ecosystem, but really have a long-term impact, and वो generational impact होगा. So this is my only summation.
No, thank you so much. I think that's very interesting that, you work with one life and you can impact so many lives in this following generation. So that's a very, very interesting point that you bring up. We'll switch a little gear and move over to Dhanashri and hear from you.
So I think being an organization that also strategizes as well as implements some of the CSR projects, we straddle both the sides of the story somewhere. So what we've come across in terms of models, कि क्या काम करता है, and taking forward where Abhishek or Satyajit or Monika left off, to say that not besides it being context specific, the openness to identify the gaps in that location. Sometimes the alignment often happens between the priority different organizations and the stakeholders, but when that is complemented with identifying local gaps, what is needed here? And how can I address that gap? Community engagement ka example Abhishek ne liya. I think similarly, when we go into schools and do life skills sessions, that's when we were able to bring a lot of children back into school. And I think that was a critical factor for the school to start engaging. So वो एक ecosystem approach है, वो कभी-कभी with the school and its own system of working, they're not able to reach out. So outreach with different models, finding the right alignments, dovetailing with some of the existing government programs. If we are trying to create model schools, for example, PM Shri is an example, school health program is another example. So we could dovetail into those programs so that those programs succeed. We can create those number of model schools. And last but not the least, I think the model must be, and when it is designed for system engagement from day one, that's when we are not asking the question about sustainability in the final year, but we are designing for it right from the word go. And I think there is an opportunity here where multi-year CSR projects are being funded. We can fund 1 + 3 or 4-year projects. And that's an opportunity to design for impact and design for scale, because which is not achieved in a yearly tangible measure, but you can design for impact and scale with this opportunity. So those are a few points. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I think that's a very interesting point where we are saying that, program needs to be designed for scale, because given the country that we are all working in and living in, scale is our biggest strength and our biggest weakness. So I think it's important to have scale and sustainability at the back of our program design. Thank you so much, panelists, for sharing this. Before I open this up to the audience, I'd like to ask my panelists one more round of questions. And Abhishek, given that this is your expertise, we'll begin with you this time. And we'd like to sort of reflect a little bit in terms of, do you think there is innovation within the CSR space that can be leveraged to address this specific issue that the NEP highlights, which is of creating multiple pathways to learning involving both formal and informal education modes, where we are, talking about introducing skills to younger learners and ensuring that school to work transition piece is there. So what has been your experience working in this space in terms of leveraging the innovation that CSR partners are doing?
अभी मैं बात कर रहा था यहाँ पे आने से पहले कि in अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी गवर्नमेंट, CBSE has launched a dedicated curriculum for entrepreneurship. हमें से कितने लोगों ने, कुछ लोगों ने पढ़ा भी होगा, देखा भी होगा, बहुत सारे लोगों ने इम्प्लीमेंट करने की भी कोशिश की होगी. But after 2 decades, now the innovation is the buzzword, right? But कभी हम पलट के देखें कि 2 दशकों में, 20 years में हमने क्या किया. So यहीं पे चीज़ें आती है. ऐसा नहीं था कि इंडस्ट्री नहीं थी इंडिया में. इंडिया में बहुत सारे बड़े बड़े कॉर्पोरेट हाउस, बहुत सारे राइट माइंडसेट के साथ काम करने वाले लोग थे, बट वो शायद इंटेंशन का मैचिंग जो फ्रीक्वेंसी था ना, वो मैच नहीं कर रहा था. नाउ विद दिस पॉलिसी, आई एम जस्ट शेयरिंग 2-3 एग्जांपल्स. राइट नाउ वी आर हैविंग 10,000 schools who are having dedicated Atal tinkering lab. And I'm just one disclaimer कि I'm not talking on behalf of the government और मैं कोई spokesperson नहीं हूँ, but I had visited some of them. I'm just sharing the few examples. They are very excited to leverage that lab. बहुत कुछ करना चाहते हैं बच्चे. आप वहाँ पे जाएंगे तो वो कुछ न कुछ 3D printer के साथ भी कुछ न कुछ कोशिश कर रहे हैं. But what they are lacking proper mentorship support. Some of them are really lacking that. अब 10,000 स्कूलों में गवर्नमेंट कितना पैसा इन्वेस्ट कर रही है? आई एम नॉट हैविंग एग्जैक्ट डेटा, बट आप अंदाज़ा लगा लो कि कम से कम 15 से 20 लाख रुपए उस पर इन्वेस्ट हो रहा है। वहाँ पे उस पूरे इनोवेशन, सो ऑलमोस्ट ऑल बिग companies, corporate houses, they are having so many equipped person. And recently, few years back, government launched one program called Vidyanjali. So Vidyanjali program का purpose क्या था? Purpose ये था, those who are skillful person, those who are having some passion to see some differences. हम हमेशा गांधी जी की बातें करते रहते हैं कि हम जैसा बदलाव चाहते हैं उसके लिए हमें भी कुछ करना पड़ेगा, हमें भी कुछ इन्वॉल्व होना पड़ेगा। बट हम में से कितने लोगों के मन में आया थॉट कि चलो हम किसी एक गवर्नमेंट स्कूल के बच्चों के साथ बात करते हैं, उनकी चैलेंजेस जानते हैं और उनको सॉल्व करने की कोशिश करते हैं। सो सोशल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आर डूइंग इट, CSR is also helping them, but now we are having one platform, Vidyanjali. I think CSR can through CSR, आप पैसे दे रहे हैं, सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं, I think on the same time you can engage, and I'm really acknowledged one organization, पिरामल, अजय पिरामल, बहुत सारे ऐसे इनिशिएटिव्स करते रहते हैं जिसकी वजह से गवर्नमेंट स्कूलों को, इंस्टीट्यूशंस को हेल्प मिले। बाकी लोग भी बहुत सारे करते रहते हैं कि कैसे हम उसको सपोर्ट करें। सेकेंड थिंग आई जस्ट वांट टू शेयर, इंडिया में इनोवेशन इज बज़वर्ड, एवरीवन नोज इट, बट इनोवेशन को लेकर जो माइंडसेट बनाना है, उसको लेकर हाउ वी कैन क्रिएट सच इनेबलिंग एनवायरनमेंट इन द सोसाइटी। We heard about the business blaster initiative of Delhi government, but again I'm repeating कि 20 सालों से हमारे पास करिकुलम था बट हमने उसको इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं किया। So how we can move ahead? So move ahead. Recently CBSE has launched one course on design thinking from class 6th. I think India is the first country in the world जो design thinking पे course launch किया। But who will implement it? This course is not ये compulsory course नहीं है, वो elective course है। कितने पेरेंट्स उसको डिजाइन थिंकिंग के महत्व को समझते हैं, इंपॉर्टेंस को समझते हैं? वहाँ पे जो बड़े ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं, हाउ वी कैन डू समथिंग सो दैट डिजाइन थिंकिंग कैन बी इंटीग्रेटेड। हमने बहुत सारी बातें करी हैं कि फॉर एग्जांपल हर ऑफिसेस में आजकल या हर बड़े हाउसेस में, बड़े कॉर्पोरेट हाउसेस में, बड़े ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, दे आर मोर सेंसिटिव अबाउट द इश्यूज लाइक क्लाइमेट चेंज, द जेंडर एंड एवरीथिंग। बट यहाँ पे वो जो वहाँ पे जो चीज़ें चल रही हैं, हाउ वी कैन इंटीग्रेट इट विद द एग्जिस्टिंग ट्रेनिंग मॉड्यूल्स। सो मेनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आर प्रोवाइडिंग सो मेनी ट्रेनिंग्स, so how we can provide how we can integrate all those existing models, all those existing programs. Suppose some organizations is supporting for the social emotional learning and you are providing funding support to them. So maybe we can add some additional things so that we can, make it vibrant. बहुत सारे organizations हैं, those who had funded so many toilets, जो स्वच्छ भारत, स्वच्छता विद्यालय, ऐसे सब बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स हुए हैं, उस पर बहुत पैसे खर्च किए। बट some of those schools who were funded by the CSR, they are not functional. Why? Because हमने बनाने के लिए पैसे तो दिए, बट उसको उस माइंडसेट को बनाने के लिए ट्रेनिंग नहीं दी, शायद उसके लिए हमने बहुत ज़्यादा पुशअप नहीं किया कि कैसे वो फंक्शनल रह पाए। सो आई थिंक द अप्रोच वी हैव टू अडॉप्ट इज टू assess the current system, identify the need, and on the basis of the need, I think we can leverage the, in fact, technology aspects. बहुत सारे technological advancement की वजह से, I think you can see the changes. Now we are having some platforms like Diksha and everything, but I think CSR बहुत सारी ऐसी चीज़ों पे पैसे invest कर सकती है या जहाँ पे engage हो सकती है to see some tangible changes.
Thank you so much. I think sustainability needs to be at the core of any innovation. Otherwise, it will just remain a buzzword and not something long term. We'll move back to you, Dhanashri, and hear from you.
So I think two things first is defining innovation itself. Because in the context of leveraging CSR funds, today innovation itself needs to be defined slightly differently. what is innovation in the education space is everything that has not been tested. And therefore, the flip side of innovation is also the appetite for risk, because you wouldn't succeed sometimes. So how do we create the appetite for risk? How do we support models that can be tested? And how do we put in funds for some of them to succeed, some of them to fail, but to arrive at a conclusion that this is what works? So I think, in a way, it's about supporting processes, it's about supporting capacities, it's about supporting an approach. Because उस चीज़ के लिए approach नहीं है, तो हम innovate करना चाहते हैं. So this sometimes doesn't have the funds that it requires, and that's what it's going to take. And I think we have worked with some of the partners who have tried to break through the clutter, taken risks. For example, today NEP underlines a sports integrated approach, for example. It talks about it as a cross-curricular pedagogy, कि अगर आप sports को इस्तेमाल कर सकते हो, so it can be a way of teaching so many different things besides building the individual's own personality. So if that is the approach, then how do we take the risk of doing that thing at scale? And to be honest, there are some partners who have supported us to be able to do that kind of work at scale. But I think what's required is to redefine impact itself, as I said before, and to not look at only इस साल के आखिर में what are the numbers am I getting? But really to start looking at, did I build capacities? Did I build an institution? Did I strengthen a process? Did I support an innovation for it to fail? But in the process, I set in place some measurement, some matrix. We know how to measure this point forward, and we've built a model out of this. So I think that is what is needed, because the document is path-breaking. But इस तरह का innovation करने की ज़रूरत है. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a timer which is gone from 10 minutes to 5 minutes to now 3 minutes. So I'm afraid we may not have a chance for audience questions. So just last comments from first Monika and then Satyajit. So yeah, we have the timer there, but quickly your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'll not take much time, but I think Dhanashri and Abhishek has spoken a lot. I think one thing that I want to say here from a CSR perspective is, normally when we look at any programs, and of course, impact is important, learning outcomes are important, but at the same time, I would say that innovation also needs that space where there is a certain element of starting it off and not knowing, as Dhanashri said, maybe in the first year, what is the impact, that's going to be. But at the same time, having our outcome, in place and trying to put up milestones. So that's important. But I think I would say that we have initiated such a program, and we're really looking for that model with Nalanda, where the team is also here, wherein, it's a very, very innovative program and a long-term program, but we are really looking forward what the impact would be. But yes, I think we'll have to take that step up, and only then we can, go further in this space. I'll stop it there.
Thank you so much for keeping time. Satyajit, last thoughts.
So yeah, I won't take much time, but I'll just say that, look, as maybe going back to what Dhanashri said, the understanding of what is innovation is sometimes lacking, and if it is lacking, let's say even at an implementing agency or a curriculum design or somebody who's skilled in the area, you can imagine how it could be at a funding level. So I think it's important for people who are working on the ground to come up with some analysis and probably, and I think there are funders or there are CSR enterprises which will be able to take some risk, obviously, but I think that somewhere just throwing up some models which are not just tried and tested, but probably which allow that innovation to come through is important. And one interesting and probably semi-related point is using more employee volunteering. I think, where, sort of, which allows probably slightly non-traditional means of, imparting learning and using that as more of, what corporates could do. So that's just my last thoughts. Thanks to you. Thank you. Back to you, Kanupriya.